Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Oh, very good. Tonight's the big night, the last debate during this election period of time, the election that will be determining the future of civilization.
That's right.
You know, the importance, I've always kidded about how important every election is, and they're not insignificant, but coming to the conclusion that there's never been a tremendous difference between Republicans and Democrats, and if there were, it seems like the deep state took over anyway. But anyway, there is a debate on. There's a lot of people going to watch it, and it's a horse race. It's entertainment. I think this is what I've observed so far is mostly entertainment. They don't get down to the serious issues. I guess there are some disagreements, on immigration and some other things. But what I'd like to do today is you and I ask the questions, and we'll pose them to each other, on what we would ask, if they all of a sudden called up and say, hold the debate. We want Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul to run the debate. So we better be prepared.
That's right.
And I guess the best we can do is we'll ask these questions. It could take a long time if we want to get all our questions answered, but we'll ask these questions, and maybe we should just email them to them and see they might respond and send us their answers. But there's been a lot of subjects that they haven't touched on, and I want to start off with one. The subject is one of my favorite subjects because I consider it important, and it has to do with the Federal Reserve, Federal Reserve monetary policy. And the question would key in on the specifics of the principle of monetizing debt. Do either of the candidates believe that we should curtail the power of the Fed to monetize debt? Maybe they say, well, I don't know what all that means, but I think they know what the consequence is. This opens up the door, to spending, is if they can monetize debt. That is, the Treasury, the Congress spends money, the Congress, issues Treasury bills, and if the Fed buys them, they buy them with money they've created out of thin air. So it opens up the door, no restraints, and since there's nothing backing the currency, it opens up the door to big government. And since this opens the door to spending, I'd ask them also, including in this, is which departments are you going to get rid of? Any departments at all? Even Rick Perry wanted to get rid of 3 departments. How many are you guys going to get rid of?
Remember which ones.
But there may be blank stares there because I don't think we're going to get very, very far by getting an answer on that. But, of course, spending is the issue. Monetizing debt, the Federal Reserve facilitates all this. And whether it's infrastructure or military spending, it seems like the real vehicle for encouraging the spending is this monetizing of debt. So I'd try to pin it down on them and say, do you believe that we should be concerned and should we do anything to curtail the power of the Federal Reserve to monetize debt?
Yeah, that's a great question.
What kind of questions might you ask them?
The only thing I've heard on that, by the way, is Trump saying they need to cut waste. And that's the thing that they always throw out when they don't really have an idea about real cuts.
Waste, fraud, and abuse to pay for everything that they want. We've heard that for a long time.
Well, if you don't mind, Dr. Paul, I'd first like to welcome our live guests because some of these people join us every day. We've done it before, and we just appreciate them so much joining us. It's almost like our morning coffee club.
Right.
So thanks, everyone. Mine is similar. It's sort of my pet project, which is military spending. And this is what I would ask them on, not how much more, but some questions about it. And I would throw out our 2015 military budget officially is about $600 billion. I think you could double that if you add in everything. Right. But that's 54% of total discretionary spending in the U.S. budget. Secretary Clinton's position has been, we must end the sequester, she says, of military and non-military. So she's an even-handed spender. She wants to end the sequester. Trump said he's going to eliminate the sequester. And here's Trump's answer on what he's going to do with the military. So they both want to increase. He says, I'm going to make our military so big, so powerful, so strong that nobody is going to mess with us. So, and I have a chart I'd like to put up to illustrate how weak and small our defense budget is. If you have a look, here's the U.S. $598 billion in 2015. And look around, Dr. Paul. Do you see anyone else in our neighborhood?
Oh, boy. And, you know, what came to my attention when you showed me this chart was, if you look at the U.S. and that 598, which is much bigger, as you stated, and you look at the rest, first, it looks like we're pretty well protected by water. That's one thing. But when you look at it, you see all these other spendings, which are mediocre. But at the same time, if you ever superimpose that with the bases that we have, all the bases, the money that we're spending it over there.
Yeah.
And yet, of course, the threat to us being invaded is essentially nil.
Yeah. So the question is, with that chart put up behind them, I would ask the question, how much more military spending do we need to get to where you want to be?
Yeah, that'll be a good one. I imagine it would be hard for them to get pinned down because they're always looking to save all that wage so they can spend more. I have a question that I'd like to ask them dealing with economic policy. You know, there's a lot of jobs leaving the country, and I think that is so, but it has to do with, you know, us exporting our inflation because we get to print the reserve currency of the world, and it makes it easy for us to spend overseas in various things. But other things, it's hard for us to compete. We have the regulations and we have the taxes, but we have another thing which is a major factor in our inability to compete, and that has to be with the cost of labor. Oh, you can't talk about cost of labor because you're attacking the middle class. No, the middle class has been attacked because of the depreciation of money, and inflation benefits the rich and the banks and all this, and the special interests like the military-industrial complex. So, no, the middle class isn't hurt because they need higher wages. That has been tried. It was tried in our Depression, and that's why the Depression got so long. So I would ask him specifically, do you believe in the minimum wage law? And I suspect that's been their position. But that means that the individual can't contract for labor. So if somebody wants to offer a job to an individual and the individual agrees that, boy, I'll do that for $10 an hour. I'm unemployed. I want to do this. But they come along and they say, that's illegal. You're going to get punished. The businessman is going to get fined or go to jail for hiring people. You're being harmful to people who are poor. So they're not allowed. They're prohibited from employing that person. So they said you have to give them $20 an hour because whether it's the minimum wage that boosts it up to 15 or so, or whether it's the pressure that the union can apply to manage wages and push wages higher than the market. But it's all done because they want to get votes, of course, but it's all done because they're humanitarians and they want to get them a fair shake. But real wages keep going down. Even today, there was a report, real wages are down again. And this is why there's a lot of people out there that are very, very angry, but they don't quite understand this. And then they wonder why jobs go overseas. So my question would, do you believe that minimum wage are a proper function of our governments, especially our federal government? And do you think there's any harm done by unions having as much power as they have that prohibits voluntary cooperation between individuals and companies who are willing to work and want to work for less than the artificial wage that some of our companies have had to endure? And one of the other things that's included in this that pushes the wages up, of course, part of the wage is these fancy bonuses, or not the bonuses, the retirement funds. Yeah. Just think of the cities and all the unions, how they push these wages up, and debt is the problem. But I'd want to know, what is their position? Are they open-minded to suggesting that maybe there's a gross distortion in the wage costs in this country through minimum wage laws and unions that prompts many of our jobs to go overseas?
And you'd almost think that'd be a no-brainer for Trump. You know, that's his main thing, it's his mantra. Jobs overseas, jobs overseas. You're pointing out an excellent way to prevent the jobs from going overseas by simply allowing the people to work for whatever they can get.
Legalize freedom?
Legalize freedom. The other one, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, that we've been very interested in, is motivating terrorism. It's really about national security. They both say they want to keep us safe. We've got to keep America safe. both have determined to do more fighting in the Middle East. Trump says he wants to bomb the blank out of ISIS, presumably in the Middle East. And Clinton prefers the same end, but her approach would be more CIA, more special forces, no-fly zones, this sort of thing. But coming down to it, they both want to intervene a heck of a lot more in the Middle East. But there's been plenty of evidence, plenty of university studies, and even we talked last week about an FBI counterterrorism study showing that what motivates terrorism overseas is seeing U.S. attacks on people, on civilians, on places, on collateral damage overseas. So I would ask them, are you not worried that your interventionist foreign policy may be actually making us less safe and not more safe?
You know, that, of course, hits home because that subject came up in the debates, and I had a little confrontation with an individual who used to be the mayor of New York City. And after that little confrontation, actually, it was a great benefit in a political sense for me reaching more people because It was obvious a lot of people, agreed with what causes terrorism. But today, he's still very much involved, and he's an advisor to one of the candidates. Yeah. So I don't see how that will change. But pinning them down like you want to on what do they really think, is cause of terrorism, because it's key to it. Is it George Bush's argument on why they come here or want to do us harm? Yeah. Because we're free and prosperous. I mean, that's not going to work.
It's almost like it's somehow a sin to look at motivation. It's a matter of self-preservation.
Yeah, you'd think so. Anyway, I have one that I would ask them, both of them, the question, what are you going to do about the drug war? Do you agree, as many individuals and a growing number of Americans are agreeing, let's get rid of the federal war on drugs, and the states are nullifying some of these drug laws, and there's so much abuse. Aren't you concerned about the abuse of civil liberties? Aren't you concerned about this being one of the key problems with the borders? Yes, we talk about illegal immigration, and there's a bunch of that to deal with, but just standing aside from that, the borders are very violent, mainly because of the drug war, the drug warriors. And how can you see this prohibition on drugs haven't done any good at all? It's been a violation of civil liberties, our privacy, and all these problems. Can't you give us any hope that you would, at least reassess this? What about the prison situation? We have so many people in prison, and they can be in prison for life. With no chance of parole, without having ever committed a violent crime. If you're a third offender on drug issues, that's sort of like saying, well, let's make cigarettes illegal because they're so dangerous and they kill people. But if we catch you 3 times sneaking a smoke, we're going to put you in prison for life. It's not a whole lot different than that. Besides, if they could get rid of this drug war, there'd be so much less violence. But here we have 5% of the population and 20% of the prisoners. That's one thing that we're really doing great on. We have more prisoners than ever.
We're number one.
And then we say privatize. Of course, we'd like to privatize a lot, but we don't want to privatize and keep government functions in privacy. And, whether we have contractors overseas or privatized prison, because guess who lobbies, for these laws? It's the people who run private prison. Sure. They don't want this. The drug dealers won't like these laws. There are some very devout religious people who believe they're doing God's work by saying, "Oh, we're going to make sure that you don't indulge in drugs," not recognizing that prescription drugs are much more dangerous than the street drugs. They kill a lot more people. But I would really like to pin them down, and it would be great, if you're doing this, these questions would be much better if you have some follow-up, because they're going to hedge and they're going to throw out some cliches, but they ought to be pinned down on how can you accept this, especially if you claim you live in a free society. Well, we have to protect people against themselves. They might do dumb things. Well, that's the opposite. of a free society. That's an authoritarian society. So therefore, it can be used. This issue can be used to really pin people down on, are you an authoritarian or do you happen to believe in liberty? And right now, I'm afraid the authoritarians are running Washington, and the libertarian position of non-aggression isn't being well represented in this campaign, especially in this debate that we hear tonight. I don't think there will be any great champion of personal liberty.
And just from a strategic point of view, I mean, first of all, nobody could accuse you of being a Trump supporter or supporting either candidate, so that's safe territory. But, we were talking yesterday on the drive home about all of the blunders he's made in his campaign that would have just been an open door for him. And I think the drug war is a perfect one because he's a great messenger for this kind of message like you. He doesn't consume alcohol, doesn't consume drugs. He's very opposed to these, so there's no danger of hypocrisy. He could come out and say, here's my position. I think they're terrible. I never do them. I won't do them. But I'm going to, because of the border problems, because of the crime problems in the prison, I'm going to move toward letting the states handle it. It's such an easy win-win for him, and boom.
I think you could use that same analogy on the terrorism. Because if you don't look at the real cause of terrorism, it's easy to be opposed to terrorism, but you should look at the statistics and find out how dangerous terrorism in this country really is, which is nil compared to so many other dangers like these drugs. The drug war and the militarization of our police. Those are the real causes. But it is a real shame that they won't look at this. But it's one place that I'm optimistic about. Things are changing. I mentioned the fact that some states are nullifying the laws, and maybe I always dream that what we'll do is we'll wake up like we did a prohibition of alcohol. One day they woke up and the American people say, hey, this is terrible. Yeah. Let's get rid of prohibition. Of course, back then, the Constitution was changed. It was easy to be precise and change it. Today, we do all these things willy-nilly, without concern for the Constitution. So it's a little bit more complex.
In the last area that we thought we would ask a question, and this, of course, this goes back to our longtime friend Lou Fisher, who's on the board of advisors of the Institute and the great scholar of the separation of powers. And, I think we're both probably indebted to him for his scholarship. But this has to do with executive branch power. And it is a huge concern. Couple of things on Barack Obama. And he, by the way, is not the worst, believe it or not, on executive orders. He's so far a little bit better than George W. Bush. But there's still time to go. But he has issued 560 major regulations, according to the New York Times. And these would be having a significant social, economic impact. 560, signatures. He claims the power to kill or detain Americans without trial. He claims the power to take troops to war, not only without a declaration of war, not only without an authorization, but without even notifying Congress. So he has expanded executive branch power in that respect. I would ask the candidates, do either of you have a plan to restore the balance envisioned by the framers of the Constitution, where the people's branch would be the number one branch, the strongest branch of government? Are you able to restrain and constrain yourself to allow that balance to be restored?
Well, let's not hold our breath for the answer, but I think it's a great question. But we have to remember that power is very corrupting. And it seems like even the best speeches that would talk about limited government, we've seen so many people that we've talked to before they came to Congress, and, they're going to vote the way you want us to, and this sort of thing. Then they get there, and within a week you can tell they're not going to do it. But it is something that we should hold their feet to the fire, and we've said so many times that the government we have is a reflection of the people, and right now there is a dependency on government. There's an entitlement mentality, both rich and poor. There's an endorsement of Keynesian economics. There's an endorsement that authoritarianism is so much better because we can't trust the people. They're not going to take care of themselves. So we're going to pick the worst of those people, put them in Washington to dictate to everybody else, and when they mess up, everybody suffers. It's a bad system. And the only thing that's going to solve this problem is reduce the size and scope of government. And a simple first step would be to send people there only that would, understand what the Constitution said and really live up to their oath of office to follow the Constitution. Of course, I'm not going to hold my breath for that. But anyway, hopefully we get a few of these answers tonight from the debates. It's not likely to happen, but these are the issues that should be dealt with, eventually, and the opportunity will be there because the current system is not viable. It is going to collapse on us, and there will be people rebelling against it. Let's hope that the rebellion is philosophic, more than physical and violent, because that is the only way to do it. Ideas have consequences. Good ideas have good consequences. And if you allow bad ideas to fester, they have consequences too, and they're all bad. And many of the questions that we just proposed are a consequence of the bad ideas that have given us bad consequences for a long time. And right now there's a time to change that direction. Hopefully that'll occur soon. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.